Right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's time for us to make a start. So, welcome to our panel discussion this afternoon, The Opportunities Culture. So I'm Hugh Pocock from Cultura Connect, and I'm honoured here to chair this session with a fantastic panel. In today's rapidly evolving business landscape, workplace culture has emerged to be a critical factor in organisational and business success. In my day job at Cultura Connect, we work with over 200 agri-businesses, and believe me, there is a huge range of cultures in our industry, the good, the bad, and very ugly. It's no longer just about what we do, but how we do it. Culture influences everything from employee satisfaction and retention to productivity and innovation. Our dairy industry has its own unique set of challenges, along with the need for diversity, inclusion, and changing generational expectations. So understanding and shaping workplace culture has never been more important. Having the right culture helps create a winning team. And a great example of that would be Sir Alex Ferguson, manager of Manchester United, when he famously sacked David Beckham, or sold him, for no longer being the right fit and culture for their team, although he was their star player, bringing in millions of pounds worth of revenue in advertising and merchandise. So I pose you this question: should running a high-performing team in the dairy farm be any different? Our distinguished panel today brings together diverse perspectives from across the industry who can hopefully create some useful and practical insights to help with your businesses. So we encourage you as a participation in the audience today, if you've got any questions after we finish this session, to bring them. We'll be a roving mic so that we can get some feedback from our panel. So now let's meet our esteemed panellists who will guide us through this fascinating topic. So we've got Heather Wildman to my left, Phil Halhead, Paul Harris, and Patrick Morris-Eyton. I'm not going to give those guys much more of an introduction. They're going to introduce themselves. So if we could maybe start with Phil, give us an introduction about your background, your business, and then we'll pose a few questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. So Phil Halhead, third generation dairy farmer, farming on the plains just below Lancaster, right up to the coast, 300 dairy cows, also running Norbreck Genetics, a global genetics business supplying beef for dairy farmers. And then a very new business running a self-storage business alongside our agri-businesses, just a year into that. And Sally King, my operations manager, is with me, and she's just recently joined me through Cultura, Hugh, to help me grow and develop both the businesses and the people within it.
Heather.
Heather Wildman, first generation Saviour associates, saving asses, kicking asses, from a farming background in the Lake District in Cumbria. Worked my way through working for Alpha Val, Delaval, First Milk, AHDB. Set up my own business in 2014, looking at staff management, staff motivation, recruitment, leadership and resilience, and moved now into family succession. And very privileged to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Patrick.
Hi, Patrick Morris-Eyton, farm Southwest Cumbria, Lake District. We're 400 cows, just going up to 800 cows. All UK-based team, and yeah, that's our basis of our business nowadays.
Thank you, Paul.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Paul Harris. I'm the CEO and founder of Real Success, which is a recruitment and retention and HR resources business. So we help you to find staff. Once you found them, keep them, which is often a challenge, and everything else associated with that. And I'm not a farmer. I'm an adopted farmer, really. Been in the industry for about 11 years.
Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, you can see we've got a very diverse panel, so hopefully we're going to have a great discussion this afternoon. And I think before we get too deep into the questions, I think it's really interesting to see what's happening in the industry today. So as an industry, we know we have major challenges with recruitment and retaining, hence why I've got a business and Paul's got a business. But in terms of our panellists, what have you observed to be common issues with culture on dairy farms? So Paul, do you want to go first?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I think the biggest issue that we come across, there's many, but the one I would start with is an ability to communicate effectively with your team. People often think that everyone's the same, or you might occasionally scratch your head and say, why have you responded like that to the way I've just asked you to do something? So we have an issue with how we communicate staff. I don't want to take everybody else's thunder, so I'll start with that one. I've got a list of about 8 things here, but if they don't come up, I'll come back. Communication would be the first one, learning how to communicate with your staff.
Brilliant, thank you, Paul. What about you, Patrick? What issues are you seeing?
Probably our biggest one is actually communication between generations of staff, because the younger generation and the older generation communicate very differently, and even some don't have phones, which can be a challenge. And the other one is also work-life balance. People nowadays, which I completely agree with, want to not live at work as a sort of employment term, because they want to enjoy the life, which in time gone by, it's not been as much of a thing. People just worked and worked and worked. Now it's less of a requirement to have long hours.
Brilliant, thank you. What about you, Heather?
I think for me, one of the biggest culture issues with the industry we've got is our reputation. And I think, sometimes our worst people at talking about what we do and the great work that we do are ourselves, our farmers. When I go and involved in farmers, they're going the moan and groan about the work, the life, the long hours, the misery, the work and everything. And I said, well, would you do anything else? No, I love it. And I said, well, tell your face. So if you're not happy and enjoying what you're doing, why would anybody else want to do it or work with you? And I think that's something we need to really look at doing, because many farmers, when you speak to them, they do love what they're doing. They wouldn't do anything else. But we've got sort of fallen into this game or trap of looking miserable and haggard. And, most of you're all right. So talk about it and act it and smile, and, people will want to work with you and for you.
Thanks, Heather.
So the team back on the home farm, there's absolutely no family members involved in the day-to-day running. Nick, my herdsman, has been with us 19 years. They're all from non-farming backgrounds as well, which is something that's evolved. They're all UK families, and actually multi-generations of 2 families have joined us and joined our culture. The thing that's become apparent and almost happened by accident is everybody now is on a 4-day week, and it sort of expands on Patrick's comments about work life. The other thing is absolutely no requirement to do, not allowed to do really, more than 50 hours a week, 55 hours, which is still arguably too many hours, but there's a requirement for young people to be earning quite a lot of money to fund a house or purchase a car, whatever it is that they're aspiring to do. So it's that balance of doing enough hours that they fulfill their financial criteria, and one of the things we have always tried to do is pay above the norm. We're not trying to cut corners on costs with staff. We pay above. We're not going to have anybody leave our business for an extra £1 an hour, and it's the flexibility, the work-life balance, the 4-day week. The 4-day week, actually, counterintuitive, we need a lot more people, but all of those people are happy to be with us, I guess. It's not that we haven't had issues and problems, but we create a culture that is much more engaging. People are happy. They're coming back into work after a 3-day weekend, for example, and talking and buzzing about where they've been, what they've done, and they're full of energy to help us do what we need to be done.
Great. Thank you, guys. Well, so I think if you summarise some of those issues there, we talk about communicational, generational communication, work-life balance, reputation, look like you love it, working hours and pay. So those are kind of like the negative things. So in terms of, if we can leave the negativity behind, how can people begin to make these cultural shifts? So if we first maybe look at training, I know it's quite close to people's hearts on this panel, but maybe we start with you, Phil, on this one, in terms of what you do on your farm around training and what differences you've seen.
So it had to start with me. So as the leader, I've had to educate myself, came out of agricultural college, and realised that the elephant in the room for me was lack of leadership training and skill. So I've been away on lots of different things, but just briefly, Lancaster University was a lead course. It was a part-time course over 12 months, and critically working and learning alongside non-agricultural businesses. I was the only one in ag. But what became very clear very quickly was that every other industry, I actually partnered with a childcare nursery, a lady who had several childcare nurseries and the challenges of running those, and shadowed her in her business. She shadowed me in my business. We gave each other critique on that. And it's all about people. It's all about the money, the systems and everything else. So actually taking a fresh approach from outside of ag gave me a new and inspiring look into another world. And the training for the team at home is all about what their specifics are and really understanding what they want. And it might be some fairly basic stuff. It can be a 1 day away. It could be a week away. And then I followed that on myself with a course with Goldman Sachs, more in the holistic business sense. And then critically, I won a scholarship from Tesco through Arla Foods to study the lack of leadership training and resource in the UK. That was 10 years ago, back in 2014. And I got 12 days in America and interviewed some of the big businesses out there. And the reason I did the big businesses, so from 750 cows up to 40,000 cows, was they'd been on the journey already, and how did they get to where they got to? And as you maybe know, I do a few talks on that, and some of that learning was immense. And it's the soft stuff, it's the humility, it's the just understanding your team, it's the soft skills that, quite honestly, I never used to have, and I'm still learning, but it's trying to be different to what you were maybe when I was 21, and you never stop learning. So,
Heather.
I'm told I do soft skills with a sledgehammer. So for me, what I love when you go into farming families, many people have kind of accidentally grown their business. You know, we've just come home from school, worked with mum and dad or aunt and uncle, and we just kind of follow in their steps. And when we get brought in as consultants or advisors or therapists sometimes, you know, it's like, oh my God, Heather, I loved farming when it was just farming and it was just the cattle, just the sheep, just the, you know, doing the grass and the machinery. And now that I've built this big business, and it can kind of catch you unawares, you've accidentally kind of got away with it and everything's been fine. Then all of a sudden you've got, you know, not maybe always a big business, but often quite a big business, maybe complex because we've been encouraged to diversify, to bring in other enterprises. And we haven't built the structure of support underneath us, and it can feel really lonely and quite frightening, is what I'm finding with a lot of people, that they're suddenly thinking, God, how have I got here? I'm responsible for all these people, things are changing, what do I do? And we just haven't put those foundations in. So for the next generation coming in and for yourselves, to me, it's like, what are the foundations you need? And really invest in that time. And I'm a bit of a rich one here because, you know, to lose weight, you eat less and exercise more. Well, to be a better manager, you don't just bring a consultant in. You have to actually practice it and work with it yourself. And I think it's finding what works for you and what works for your staff. And if it's not working, if you're saying things and you're not getting the right responses you want, you maybe need to look and saying, how do you do it differently? And but building up a right good team around you and knowing when to delegate, I think, can be good. But also, I think it's great what Phil just said about working away. I always encourage young farmers, don't come straight home, go and work away, work in other organisations, other sectors, and then come back. And then have a structure for how we're going to plan the vision for the business. What is our business? What kind of person am I? You know, because some people should never be let near staff. And other people are just fantastic. So do you maybe let someone else do it and you run the business?
Brilliant. Thank you, Heather. Patrick, into training on your farm, what have you put in place?
So training, I have a discussion with each individual that we have on farm, talk to them about if they want any specific training, that come to me. If it's pertinent to the business, then we will find a way to sort it out. That's not a problem. And then I'll speak to people like Kite and any others really, and if they have specific courses, like they've got a herd manager's course at the minute, we have someone on that, I'll suggest it to one of my team if I think it'd be pertinent to them, and then they can hopefully expand into that and bring it back to the business long term. So I didn't actually do college or university. I left school and then went away and worked for a while, came back and I did Tesco Future Farmer Foundation, which I found invaluable for getting to know more people in the industry, but also learning a bit more about leadership and communication as well. And following on from that, I did Myesco Young Farmer Leadership Academy, which again was building into that leadership role. That for me was way ahead of anything I'd ever done, and it was that training that helps me try and help my team to achieve what we are. Herdsman's been with us 45 years now. and then my 2 ICs, 8 years I think it is, and we've got a good team of youngsters underneath them, which we seem to attract pretty well because we want to put training into them. So it's an important part of our business.
Brilliant. Thank you, Patrick. Paul?
So just supporting everything that's just been said, but I'm just going to add another little dynamic to this as well, which is everyone talks about training. Your team will say, can I go for some training? But it starts with the mindset of us as business owners. We wouldn't allow someone just to jump on a piece of machinery with no training whatsoever. We wouldn't expect them to look after the cows or our calves without some sort of training or protocols. And yet us often as leaders think we can just manage people without any form of training at all. And in most other industries, people get trained on how to manage people. So the first thing I would suggest is you've got to have a mindset, and I think Phil touched on it right at the beginning really, that I need to learn how to do this. And then you go and train yourself first how to manage people. It's probably one of the most difficult things you've got to do if your business has grown. And exactly like Heather says, supporting what she says, suddenly you've gone from being responsible for the task to being responsible for the people who are responsible for the task. So it's no longer about the task, it's about the people. And we think, well, we can just do that, can't we? And many of us sometimes follow our parents or aunties or uncles that are not always the best role models on how to manage staff. So my key thing with training is go and teach yourself first. So really going right back to what Phil said at the beginning, go and learn yourself. Talk to people like us who can help you with courses and programs. It's just as important as managing your animals, managing your land, is learning how to manage people.
If I can pull on that sort of mindset piece you said there, Paul, I think it's really important. Phil, how have you sort of changed that? You alluded to it earlier on, but it's a big subject really, isn't it?
Well, the mindset piece is what it's all about for me, and I think it shines, and it comes back to what Paul's just said, but also Heather about the smiling, positive. Try and be as positive as you can in the darkest of times. I'll give you an example. I think leadership is fairly straightforward for anybody in any business. When business is running smoothly, when the ship's sailing on calm seas, pretty straightforward. You don't need to be too great at it. You can fudge through. But when times are tough, and unfortunately too often in agriculture we do have those darker days, those times when finances aren't too hot. And I remember 2016 like it was yesterday. We were on 18.3p a litre for our milk. We were losing a serious amount of money as a business, literally month in, month out. We were heading for a car crash every year. And I made the decision there and then that we'd seen some rough times, but this was going to be particularly bad. Brought the team in as a group, as a really close-knit group, more often than we'd ever done before. And all I said to them, I said, look, guys, I said, it is bad. I owned up to the honesty of the because they were hearing the chatter. They knew that I was having discussions about, maybe interest only on some parts of our business, this sort of chat. I said, please, I said, do me two things. I said, one is stop reading the Farmer's Guardian. Sorry for the press in the room. Stop reading the Farmer's Guardian, the Farmer's Weekly. No, this isn't going to get reported, is it? But the point was, no disrespect to the press, but it can be a lot of negative stuff coming at you, both on the television screen, in the papers. So stop doing that. Focus on tomorrow morning coming in and trying to be a little bit better than you were today, and let me make sure, and I guarantee you that we'll get through this. We are going to see a better day, but the problem of the business right now, and as a leader, brought in Dr. Kay Carson. Maybe some of you remember Kay, maybe not around the industry as much now, but she taught me and the team all about lean management. And so one quick example of that would be the diet feeder at the time didn't have all the extra technology on that we have today, but it was all about not just tipping the extra 100 kilos of caustic wheat into that feeder wagon. We did the sums on the extra 100 kilos today, over 7 days, over 30 days, over 365 days, and the financial result of that, and the real minutiae, and really focusing them in on the detail, but giving them the confidence that I was taking the weight of the problem off the shoulders, and they just had to come in and be good and better.
Hugh, can I just pick up?
Yeah, please, Paul.
Just pick up again. I know we're pushing the mindset piece quite hard here, but I think that's the start point. If you talk to anybody in the show today, often they'll say, what's your biggest problem on the farm? And they'll say people. So people are the problem. No, they're not. People are potentially your biggest asset. Now, we're not being Pollyanna down the frontier and saying it's all easy and we can manage people easily and there's loads of people out there. But if we've got the attitude that people are our problem, people will be your problem. So starting off with how can we make them our biggest asset? And I think Phil's a great example of that, what he's done with his team. But it starts up here with how we look at them in the first place. And I love what I often quote Heather, by the way. She says, make your face look like it when you're enjoying what you do. And she's right. You know, we've got to talk the industry up, not down, and get down with ourselves. That's not to say we think it's not difficult. It is. But if you think people are your problem, they will be. If you think people are your opportunity, they will be. And that's just a mindset difference.
Thanks, Paul. Heather, anything to add to the mindset piece?
I'm a big believer of vision, communication, collaboration. I keep things really simple. And what is your vision for you as an individual, for you as a business, for you as an organisation, for you as an industry? Where are you? Where do you want to be? How are you going to get there? And how are you going to celebrate when you get there? Because so often we're always chasing, and we always think we've failed. When do we actually take a break and think, Christ, we've actually done quite well. We're doing all right here. You know, let's have a moment to celebrate because there's always something else to do. The next thing is, how do you communicate that vision? You are not working alone. You are not working in a silo. And many staff I know are bloody fantastic. They're desperate to know what to do, how to do it, and want to do it better because they really are proud of where they work. But if you don't share with them your vision, your dream, your goal, and you micromanage them, then they don't know if they've got some spare time, that what they're doing is helping you go forward. So you need to verbalize your vision, and a lot of farmers hate that. And they believe through the power of telepathy, everybody knows what they want, how to do it, when to do it, and not to feck it up. But telepathy, I am sorry, ladies and gentlemen, if you get nothing out of this, telepathy does not work in a marriage, in a relationship, in an employment situation. You need to verbalize what you actually want. And you need to say the words out loud, and then you need to check that they have heard what you think you have said. Because often what you think you have said is not what you have actually said. My daughter is there, she will reiterate what I think I have said. Sometimes the words come out completely wrong. And I, it's easy to say this, but it's a simple thing. And folks say, oh, well, I don't want them to know everything, but they need to know everything that they can make an impact and an influence on in their day-to-day job. So that thing of what Phil said about sitting them down once in a while and giving them a big picture about industry, about standards, about where the farm's going, and then talking to them through their day-to-day job. If they're milking, what's the cell count, what's the back to scan, the cull cows, the lameness, the practical things. And a lot of the times we tell them when there's a problem with the back scan, we tell them a problem when there's cell counts, we tell them when the issues, but when do we praise them when things are good? And it's a little bit about we've got to share the good with the bad and taking it forward, because collaboration is how we succeed. Collaboration will make winning and being successful so much more fun and so much more enjoyable, and you will achieve more quicker.
Brilliant. Very good. Patrick, anything to add on the mindset piece?
Yeah, it's just actually what Heather's just said there. So when I do a sort of every couple of days, I'll have a conversation with every single team member, especially the main ones, relief staff. I try and see at least once a week if I can. And we have a discussion about, is there anything that I can do to help them? Is there anything that they could do to help me? And what we've sort of, that vision of where we're going for the next, for the long term, but also for the very short term as well. And that I've found helps with the mindset. They understand what's going on and they take much more responsibility for it. And that's, again, the responsibility part, even for young members of the team, if they feel they've got that responsibility, they step up to the plate more often than not. Yes, we all make mistakes, but that's life. We're people. I make mistakes, and if I do, I go and apologise, say, yeah, sorry, I've screwed up, and I've made your life harder, so I'll do what I can to sort it. And generally, if they screw up, they come to me before there's a major issue and say, look, sorry, I've made a mistake. How do we sort it? If they haven't already sorted it. So I think it is that mindset of trying to be, it's a team, work together. And like none of my team or anyone else really will hear me say the word staff. It's the team. I don't like the word staff personally. I think it can make people feel almost degraded a bit. If you say team, they feel much more on a level, and that seems to work quite well for us.
Brilliant. I think there's some great stuff coming out there, and there's a common theme coming through here, which is communication. And I think, again, that's a whole subject on its own. So if we can maybe just cover that a little bit, if we can. Paul, do you want to make a start?
No, I'd love to start there, yeah. So what do we mean by communication? To me, you split it into two different areas. You've got your style of communicating, and you've got your process of communicating. So whether you're having regular one-to-ones, like Patrick's just said, speaking to your team on a regular basis, that's important. Having staff meetings, get-togethers like Heather's talked about. But also it's the style. You may not be surprised to discover that not everyone's like you. Revelation there from today's meeting. But actually what we tend to do when we go into work in the morning, we want everyone to work like we do. So we get frustrated when they don't wind the hose up after washing down like we do. And they get frustrated because they don't do things quite as we would do them, or they respond in a different way. So understanding the personality style, which is a huge thing that we do at Real Success, is vital to getting that communication style working. So find out what your own personality style is. There's lots of systems out there. Work out, therefore, how you're best communicating and how people want to communicate to you. Some people want to be spoken to directly. Just tell me as it is. Others want all the detail and the information. Some want you to ask them how they are. And you might be thinking, but I don't want to know how you are. But you've got to ask them to get the best out of them, and some are full of ideas and creativity, and we're all a blend of all of those. Work out how to communicate to your staff, and then work out when to communicate to them. That'd be my advice.
Brilliant. Patrick?
Yeah. So one of the big ones I do, again, when I have those one-to-ones, I say to everyone, if there's anything you think we could change, tweak, whatever, or we're doing wrong, please open door, come and talk to me. Let's see if we can find a way around it, whether it be something we're doing with the cows, something I'm doing management with them, or something anywhere else in the system. If it's an idea we haven't already tried, especially, we will give it a go, and it's not a bad thing on anyone. If it doesn't work, we go back to how we were doing. If it was working better, or if it works, great, wonderful. And the team, again, because that communication of being allowed to talk about it, they find that much more empowering to come up with the ideas of how to adjust things, make their lives easier normally, but they also have to understand, and I've said this to them numerous times, they do understand it, is if I'm trying to change something, is generally to make their life easier in the long run. It might be a couple of weeks or whatever of a bit of hassle getting into a new system, but it's generally for the best. If it doesn't work, we go back. But it's all about talking about it so they understand where you're going, what you're doing. Otherwise, that's where we found we fall down.
You talk about sort of coming up with ideas there, Patrick. Do you reward for people coming up with ideas that make a difference?
Not specifically. It's how do you reward them is the challenge we've found. We do a couple of beef boxes every year, so we'll fatten an animal and we'll pay for it to be cut up, like taken to the abattoir, cut up, and we'll split it out. The team get it, we take nothing out of it, and that's a reward for all of them as a bit of a show of appreciation. But actually trying to reward individuals for certain things I find is quite difficult, because how do you make it fair? How do you quantify it?
Yep. Yeah, it can be a demotivator too.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks. Heather, any thoughts on that?
I think we don't spend enough time and consider enough about recruitment, and I think being really honest with yourself and your business, what you're offering and what you're looking for, because often we very much generalise the position, and then we're often in a hurry and short, so we don't interview them properly, we don't check references, we maybe don't do a sufficient induction and trial period, and then have we done the training, and then when things go wrong, we're often afraid of addressing it. And I think one thing I notice with a lot of farmers in particular, big butch women and men, and that can be quite fearsome, are really intimidated and afraid of having difficult conversations and addressing poor or bad performance. And one thing I find in the culture and in a lot of agricultural places is, unfortunately, good behaviour and good performance is not acknowledged, but poor performance, poor behaviour is also not addressed. So often we lose the really good people because they get frustrated and move on, and we don't address the difficulties or the problem people because it's so hard to recruit. But Heather, I'm better having George or Mildred because we know how difficult it is getting people in the staff. And for me, that's one of the things. We've got so afraid of the HR in employment, about being sued and what do we do if it goes wrong, that we're actually making a workplace that we don't even enjoy going to. And I've seen so many farmers that are now losing their love of their business because they're afraid of their staff. And I think that is something we really have to address and support, because knowing how to shake someone's hand and say, look, this isn't working, I think we should walk away on good terms and off you go because you're not fitting in with this. But then we really do need to make sure we are praising. And so many times it's as simple as thank you, well done, really appreciate that. You know, having cake and coffee in the middle of a shift, or a beer after work, after a tough day, as well as, you know, a good time as well. If you've had a really bad time, things have happened with TB or whatever's been going on, just getting everyone together, because we don't know, I know Paul was saying about the personalities, we don't know what support network they've got when they go home. And sometimes they've got people to offload to and it's just a job because we think it is to them, but other times it's everything. And they carry that when they go home. So it's how we look after them, but maybe address the ones that aren't fitting in with the culture as well, because you can only change people who want to change.
Thank you. Phil, I know communication for you is a big thing, working with different businesses of your own. So what do you do on that front?
Yeah, well, I'll go back to the start. It was about me understanding my own personality. And I was lucky enough to go to Florida with a close friend of Hugh and I, with Chris. And we did a Holstein Association of America course, and the biggest thing I came back from that was a bloody good trip, by the way. But I did my very first Myers-Briggs personality test. Gee whiz, what an eye-opener that was, and I recognised myself straight away. If anybody's done one of those or anything similar, phenomenal. If you haven't, please probably talk to Paul or somebody, find a way of doing a Myers-Briggs. Great starting point. So I bounce into a room and I think, well, what can go wrong here? Well, what can go wrong is the person who loves the detail, who likes a quiet, sort of subdued atmosphere and wants detail. Phil bounces in the room. I'm big picture. I'm all over the place. I'm quite excited. I'm dead positive. That can be a ruddy disaster for somebody who, wants the detail. So that was the starting point. And from there, then we talk about the humility that I found out in those big businesses in America, and I've seen it through, my day-to-day across 3 different businesses. Trying to be really quite humble, trying to damp down the big red Myers-Briggs colour, trying to make sure that I'm aware of different things going on. And so, so often it's actually nothing to do with you or the business that you're operating in your day-to-day. There is a lot of things that go on, as we all know, in our own personal lives, that you cannot divorce that from the day-to-day, and that comes through the door, and you have to help somebody deal with it. A good example would be the Crave brothers in Wisconsin. So visited the 4 Crave brothers, and we walked through the cow building, and Charlie Crave put his arm round Ernesto, the Hispanic worker who'd had 3 weeks away because his wife had her very first child. This is a massive business with a lot of moving parts, several thousand cows, and a lot going on. And instead of just saying hi and sort of moving on and concentrating on the guy from the UK, he stopped, he took time, he put his arm around him. How's the baby? A little example of what it means to understand what's going on, to take the time to understand. Do you remember the birthdays of your team members? Is there a little card and a present? It's that, but it started with me, and then from there I try and I'm never stop learning, and it's such a moving part. The biggest piece I find challenging is I do the formal meetings, which I get a lot out of, but again, very young team members now really tricky to get them to sit round in a formal setting. So quite often it's the wellies on, it's the farmyard walk, it's the team talk as we're moving around their day to day, less about papers and formality and, you know, all that. We've got to do that, but actually I get a lot more out of it. And then learning that, you know, please just put it on a WhatsApp. They don't want to necessarily face-to-face with Phil, the owner of the business, but equally they want to see me often enough that I'm engaged and interested, but not too often that I'm interrupting their day-to-day. So that whole, it feels like a coaching horses, just pulling on the reins slowly, speed the horses up, slow them down. It's a real strange feeling.
Can I just pick up a couple of things, Hugh, that's been said from
yeah.
the panel? I think something that Heather said I thought really is so important. We talk about recruit attitude and alignment and teach skills and knowledge. And often we're terrified of losing the skills and knowledge for the reasons that Heather identified. Well, if I lose Flossie from my team, who's going to milk the cows? But actually nobody can work with Flossie. So actually you're losing everybody else in the team while holding on to Flossie. So at some point we've got to be brave enough to have those conversations, I think that Heather said. So I really wanted to support that. The other thing I wanted to say is we're talking a lot about communicating to people. The other thing we've got to do is listen. And often we don't take the time to listen. You touched on it a little bit, Patrick, in your, whether it's having reviews or one-to-ones with people. When you actually just take the time to listen to people, they really respond. People often say to me, I need to give my team some feedback. You know, I need to give somebody some feedback. Your team don't want your feedback. They might say they want your feedback, but what if you said to a member of your team, I'm going to give you some feedback? What do you think they're going to get? Criticism. Or another word that begins with and ends in ollocks. They're going to get something like that, and they're not looking forward to that. Your team want your attention, not your feedback, which means, as exactly as Heather says, complimenting when they do something well as having those difficult conversations when things don't go well. People often say, well, why have I got to thank them? I pay them their money. That's the salary. That's all right, isn't it? No. Just the occasion at the end of the day, thanks for your hard work today, can mean so much more than trying to, as Patrick said, coming up with complex ways of giving rewards. The best reward we can give our staff is to show our appreciation to the work that they do. Just wanted to pick up on some of the things that were said.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. I think as an industry, working hours is something that's discussed quite a lot now. If we compare the dairy industry to other industries, people work a lot longer hours. It'd be really interesting to hear the thoughts of the panels in terms of working hours. What are people doing differently? What are you doing differently in your businesses, and what you're seeing is working, what's not working? So maybe we'll start with Heather. You've travelled around quite a bit. What are you seeing?
It's funny, just what Phil said about when the dairy crisis was on. I was involved with a number of businesses that were really struggling to justify, to pay their staff. That, you know, they could justify them, but they just couldn't get the money to work. And one guy did put his staff on a 3-day week. And there was a ghast and an outcry at the time, well, how are we going to manage, what we're going to do? And, you know, fair play to him. He said, well, look, I can't make a decision to let any one of you go. I think you're all great, you know, and I will respect you. If you decide this is not for you, you need to go. But I ask you to bear with me and to give it a go. And just kind of what Phil found there as well, you know, the work got done better. There was a healthier attitude. There was less 6 days. Family life and relationships really, really improved. And it has stretched. People are doing a wee bit more, but now other people are engaging in it. And you do have more staff on your line, but that then takes that pressure off if someone's sick and ill. One thing I will also say is I encourage all of my clients to employ at least 1, if not 1.5 labour units more than they actually need. Jobs get done. People get holidays, they get rested, and there's not the pressure when people are sick. And that really does make a difference to a business. And it keeps the job tidy, because you can soon tell when someone's short-staffed or cut back, you know, those jobs just don't get done. And then, you know, you wake up with a slapped backside face because you're just seeing everything that's ahead of you. What else is happening? Changing, you know, this, you have to work 10 days on, 2 days off. Folk doing 4-hour shifts. That, you know, depending where you are, a lot of people want, you know, in between childcare. You know, a lot of women now are loving all these part-time jobs coming in. You know, it's not having that established full-time. People don't want a job for life now. They're looking at changes. They're wanting varieties. So we need to look at accommodating that a little bit more as well. And I'm curious also what the panel think about, do we need to provide accommodation with staff? That's a debate I have with a few clients of, to get a member of staff, do you give them a tied house? Is that a good thing? Is that value for money? It's part of the package, but I think it's an industry thing that we're going to have to look at changing. So I'm curious what people think about that.
Okay, we'll bring the accommodation on in a second then. If we could, Phil, you want to cover your piece on working hours? I know you've done a few different things with your team.
Yeah, well, one of the best things that ever happened at Norbreck Farm was allowing the team to do their own rotas. So it seems sort of logical in a way, but as the team leader, if you like, out and managing other businesses as well, it was crazy that I ever had any involvement with working out who was going to work on what days. Handing it over to both Nick and Charlotte, so they're the team leaders of the farm, if you like, the herdsman, and Charlotte running closely alongside Nick. The flexibility is a given. So literally, if they wanted a Wednesday afternoon off, if there's an event coming up, they can have that time off. The only time that I get involved is if the flexibility and the sharing of roles and responsibilities is abused anywhere. And then I will come in quite a firm manner and say, look, such and such, I'm afraid, Nick's been very good at swapping his rota and moving around for you, but unfortunately we're not getting that back the other way. So just that sort of referee type role of fairness and making sure that everything can happen. You can have as much time off as you want, and literally the flex is there. They all know, the standard holiday packages and everything else that go with it. That's irrelevant to me. If they want an extra week, an extra few days, family issues and problems, whatever it might be, it's all about flex. And that rolls then around a loose thing of sort of 50 hours. The best thing we did for our cows and for our people was go 3 times a day milking. Paddy's nodding his head and he's going to go down that road. So in a nutshell, we've got a wonderful team who commit to 5 a.m. till 4:30. They've got a great break at breakfast time. They've got their hour for lunch. They've still got some time at the end of the day to, the day isn't done. And then we have that a lot of working mums, all sorts of people who love being around cows and want to milk our cows, but can't give the commitment on a full-time role, but love coming and doing an evening milking. We pay a premium for that, of course. And that's a different team to the day team. And that's a golden as well, as Paddy will know. Please don't try and milk 3 times a day and use the same team for finishing at 11 at night and then coming in at 5 in the morning. That's the quick way to ruin everybody. And then, sorry, Heather, you mentioned something about, I've forgotten what it was, but there was something else you mentioned.
We'll come on to that in a minute,
Yeah.
accommodation. So, Paddy, what's your thoughts on working hours and how are you structuring it?
Very similar to Phil. We don't have it as a 4-day week. We actually have our herdsman is going to 4-day week after New Year. He has been with us 45 years. I offered it to him a year ago and he was like, no, like it how it is, don't want to change. And then he came to me 2 weeks ago and said, actually, I do want to change. It's like, right, that's fine, no problem. I said, we are doing a big building project at home, so I said, just give us a couple of months to get settled into that and then we can work on it, and not a problem. But yeah, we do exactly the same as Phil, 5 a.m. start, they get breakfast, do milking, feeding up, calves, etc., and then breakfast, work till lunch, hour off for lunch, and then work till 4, half 4. Main team go home. They have plenty of time, especially through summer, if it's not chucking it down. They can actually go and do stuff with families and such like. And then we have an evening team come in, which is actually mainly beef and sheep farmers around us in the Lake District. They all love it. They come in at 8:30, 9:15. They're gone for 10:30, 11:15. They earn a couple hours money and they say it tops them up quite nicely. That works for us. The 4-day week is something that I've toyed with. I've discussed it with the team. Some of them are interested, but some of them are like, no, we like it how it is, which is, it is a 12 on 2 off, but the weekend on is only literally feeding up and milking. It's not a full working day. It's something I still am not completely sure of long term. And also, one thing we don't do is we don't pay a salary, pay everyone by the hour. They get paid up to 50 hours on their standard rate, and anything that goes over, which includes weekend, is paid at an overtime rate. So it means everyone is paid for what work they do and is fair. We've thought about salary again. How do you match that in is quite difficult, I feel.
Yeah, interesting. Paul, you've travelled around quite a lot of farms. What are you seeing?
Yeah, this is a massive issue. It's one of the big three. For me, working hours, working conditions and health and safety are the three things we need to fix if we're going to encourage people into the industry. And we are seeing farms, Hugh, are actually now moving in the way that Phil was describing. People often say to me, how on earth do you get working hours down? It generally is by taking more staff on who are doing less hours. And I think we're in transition. For a long time, the industry's relied on overseas workers, particularly from Eastern Europe, who were prepared to come over and work the hours because they wanted the cash at the time. We don't have that available to us now. That's the first thing. Not as much as we did anyway. The second thing is the next generation coming through have a different mindset around work. They don't want to work 100 hours a week. They want a lifestyle. So we're in this transition phase where we've got to start appealing to the next generation of people coming through who want a work-life balance. Some of the people I see, and I'm sure Heather's the same, you see family farms and they haven't got enough staff. And who are the people that normally pick up the slack? It's the family themselves. So everyone's exhausted. The kids go, I don't want to rely on mum and dad. I want some sort of life. So we've got to face up to this one. And I think to hear what Phil and Patrick are doing is really encouraging for me, who's in recruitment. Also, you have to recognise there's legislation coming. The Labour government, the Conservative government have already brought in a law that says you can ask for flexible working. The Labour government are talking about a 4-day week because research has shown tired people don't perform as well as non-tired people. Hey, no surprise there. So I think this is a massive issue that we are addressing, and there are solutions. It is people. It's more people, part-time people at times, but that requires you to learn the skills on how to manage more people. So the whole thing is all connected.
Brilliant. Just pulling on that subject of tired people, that sort of links into health and safety. I know it's kind of been mentioned a little bit here, but it is becoming more of an issue, and I think it does link to culture on farm. Heather, you brought this up actually in a conversation the other day about health. What are you seeing are the issues with people not respecting health and safety, I guess?
Yeah, I think as agriculture, we do have a problem. You know, we've got one of the most dangerous industries out there, and you know, people leave their loved ones and families and come and work for us and don't go home, and that's something we should be really ashamed of, and it's something that we have to address. And, you know, I often wonder, why is that? Because a lot of us are self-employed. You know, we're our own bosses. We've got away with it. We're rushing. We're cutting corners. I'm going to do it tomorrow. It'll be fine. Until it isn't. And, you know, it's a shame that we always get cross about the fear of HSC. But, you know, it's because we haven't, you know, been on that ball ourselves. So I think tiredness, taking time. We have, I'm involved in a 1,200 cow housed 3 times a day milking farm as well. And we have a health and safety person within the organisation. We do reviews, we do training, but accidents still happen. And I think, you know, we are a busy place. We've got a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving animals and different things, but we're straight onto it. You know, everything's recorded, everything's detailed. And, you know, is it a near miss or was it an accident? And if it was a near miss, why was it a near miss, to make sure it's not a near miss again? And, you know, just to try and make sure that we do look after our people, because, it's such an important role that we often just think, oh, it's like another task, another audit. But, you know, just taking that time. And I think one thing, many farmers, we're also busy. We're walking around, but we're always doing a job or on the phone or seeing someone. When do you actually just walk around just to look and to see, to walk up and down your machinery, your sheds, your parlours, your staff housing, accommodation things, and make an audit? Because sometimes we see it but we don't clock it. So having that time, and that is your job, once a month, once a quarter, whenever it might be, I think would be things that would pay off very well.
Thank you. Paddy, what's your take on health and safety on your farm?
Oh, it's vital. Even to the point now that if a contract comes on farm or we hire, say, a muck spreader and the PTO guard is not correct, we will not use it, and we will tell them that there is an issue. And quite often it is right that we have to go and get a PTO guard or PTO shaft, whatever. But it's so important for the team, and by doing that, the rest of the team have now seen what we're doing, and they'll they will mention anything straight away if there is an issue. There is the odd time where I've caught them doing things where I go, "Oi, come on, guys, make sure that doesn't happen." But generally, we've got to a point where now, if they're not happy and comfortable doing it, or if I'm not happy and comfortable doing it, then it's not like we change how it's done. End of story. It's not worth it. I want everyone to go home at the end of the day, and that it's as simple as that. It's not negotiable for us.
Phil?
Yeah, I think it's been pretty well covered, to be fair. A couple of things to add to what Heather and Paddy have said. We have the NFU in to do an independent audit and making sure that it is done properly. It's not some... And then the other one is simple tasks. Well, not that simple, but straightforward tasks like any jobs on roofs. Our team, nobody is allowed near a roof. Just a simple example. But so we bring in contractors to do a lot of the outside work, and making sure they're working safely is an interesting one in itself. But making sure that professional people are brought in to do some of those jobs, which, you think you're going to save some time, you're going to save a little bit of money, but if somebody falls through that roof, it's a disaster. So, yeah, I mean, we just can all be better. The industry's got a shoddy reputation, but I think it comes back to, let's be honest, we're all under pressure. The industry's under pressure. It's a financial issue as much as a people issue, and I think it's tired working. It's long working hours, and let's be honest. Let's have an honest debate about where the accidents are happening. It's happening because farmers are under serious pressure. They are trying to do too much on their own, and they haven't got the resource they need. So until we start paying the fair price for food, getting a bit more money and a bit more profit through the industry, that will drive safety on its own.
Thank you, Phil. Anything to add to that, Paul?
Yeah, today's session's about culture. And all I'd ask all of you, if you're running a farm, is your approach to health and safety about compliance, or is it about culture? Because if it's about compliance, it's about ticking boxes and making sure that I just about scrape through my red tractor audit or whatever, then you haven't got a culture of health and safety. Leaders go first. If you're not going to put a crash helmet on when you get on a quad bike, don't expect anybody else to. So I think we as leaders, as far as health and safety, have got to go first, and we've got to build a health and safety culture, not just a health and safety compliance regime. I think there's a very big difference between the two. And yeah, leaders go first.
Thank you. And that pretty much sums up our conversation here. So really just taking it to the floor. Are there any questions in the audience that you'd like to ask our panel? One over there. Oh, it's not on yet. Not yet. Shout. That sounds good.
Thank you. That was an absolute masterclass from my perspective. Just sharing something which somebody much wiser than me told me, and that is that we've got two of these, one of these, and use them in that proportion. And then in addition to that, we seem to be using these by using one of those. And actually write down what you need to write down. And then follow it up and let them see the evidence that you've actually listened to them in the first place. It's not really a question, it's just sharing what somebody
Thank you.
taught me.
Yeah, they're very,
That was outstanding. Thank you very much.
very useful. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Must be all burning here. Well, one at the back. One at the back first. Yep, thank you. That's a very important word. Thank you very much. Another question at the front here.
Yeah, great panel session, brilliant. Question, technology, WhatsApp, is that a good or a bad thing in terms of communication on a farm?
Can I have a go at that?
We'll ask the farmers for this one. Phil, do you want to go first?
That's a brilliant question, and one that we've fallen foul of in the team. So WhatsApp group, three different WhatsApps group, a nutrition one, specific for the nutrition team, outside nutritionist, anybody involved in the feeding, works brilliantly, nice and smooth. Questions. a rogue member of the team on our wider WhatsApp group decided to start using it at 11 o'clock at night when something went wrong to blame somebody else. And so there was a bit of education required around the use of WhatsApp. And I think that, again, is another area, learning as you go, quickly reorganised, put down some fairly basic, just decency rules around that, and it's working really well. But yeah, it's one of those areas that can also unravel.
I personally really like WhatsApp, particularly on a staff basis, because there's a lot of dyslexia and things as well. So I think it can be a really useful thing if there's a cow bullying, or you're getting your numbers, or there's something broken. Everyone can see the date, the time, and clearly what it is and where it is. I agree with the ground rules, and I think often, particularly when young family members come into the family and start stepping up the rule, it's where's the line between friend and employer? And you can get drawn in by having a funny comment, or and then all of a sudden it's misconstrued or mistaken. And I think it's very good of having, you can have your staff banter one that you have nothing to do with, and then maybe the work one, but I think it's needed. But I personally really like them because it's evidenced who's seen it, the time, and exactly what happened.
Right, I think we've got time for one more question. Angus?
Bullying in the workplace, how do you deal with this?
Go Paul first.
Should we do the HR piece first?
Give
So it depends what you mean by bullying. But that phrase is often used. Someone will say, I'm being bullied. They're just being asked to do something in a very direct way. They don't like it. So you have to be very careful with bullying. It has a very specific description of what that actually means. But assuming somebody is bullying somebody else in the workplace, come and see us, we'll talk about the HR side of it on our stand, but you can't ignore it. You have to deal with it straight away. Often it's by suspending people until you have an investigation and work out exactly what's happened. And often, if it is the person that's got all the skills and knowledge, we can be tempted to get, well, they were just having a bad day and he'll be all right. No, you have to have a zero tolerance, would be my advice. Zero tolerance of anybody being bullied in the workplace. But there is a very specific description of what that means.
Phil, real life, what's happening?
A real life example. It wasn't bullying, but it was very close to it. Zero tolerance, straight in. Young lads thinking, having a bit of banter. It went way beyond that, and no more detail required in this room. But I dealt with it, absolutely nailed it straight away. The minute I heard about it, stopped everything I was doing on lots of other things, went straight in and dealt with it, nipped it in the bud. Zero tolerance. They understood from the conversation I had. You can tell from the passion in my voice, and it sorted itself out. And they're all getting on beautifully well, but zero tolerance straight away. Don't leave it. No argument. No room for discussion. I think you would then step into an HR thing if you went much further than I went. But so be a little bit careful with your wording and how you do it.
That's what I'm saying. Just be careful. Come and just to take
go
advice.
And see Paul. That sounds a good plan.
There's a very big difference between banter and bullying, but banter can very quickly become bullying. So just take advice from your HR professional as to what the situation is.
Great name. How much time have we got, Natalie? 2 minutes. Any more questions? Yeah, one more.
Hi guys, thank you very much. Brilliant discussion. I work for Cogent Breeding, but I've been in a very fortunate position where from the family dairy farm I've been able to go and work away from home. But we're in a bit of an interesting position at home now where we've had a member of staff celebrate quite a significant birthday. So in the next sort of 2 to 3, 5 years we might start to look at some recruitment. From Phil and Paddy's perspective, in order to build a good culture on farm, what's the biggest thing you're looking for in terms of personality?
Great question.
Someone who wants to work as part of a team. Someone wants to bring people up, bring people forward, and not just beat down on them, quite simply. One of the, as I said right at the start, was generational communication. That's been something we've found quite difficult with Hertzman, who's been here with us 45 years, similar kind of thing then, and then taking on young team members, them understanding each other, and that's that mindset of the person who's coming in and wanting to work as part of a team, but if they're going to be like a more senior member, is to bring people forward, bring people up, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for someone that is, I can do this, I can do that, I can do this. I said it's people who want to make a team, and that I think is, for a senior person, is so important.
Brilliant. Any further addition?
So, a great question, and a really difficult one to explain. And I think as you grow the business, and we've had the luxury of having quite a lot of people through our business, and I've got to an age where I've seen a lot of different people through our business now. You get quite a skill for red flags. You get a skill for feeling that somebody's really got the positivity, the passion, and the enthusiasm. If there was 3 words I'd be looking for in my first interview, my first interaction with somebody who's potentially coming into your business, a little bit of positivity, a little bit of enthusiasm, and a willingness to turn up, that would probably do for a starting point, and I'm sure Paul will add to this as well. Paul's probably got some great thoughts on it, but you can train for everything, but you've got to have the nuggets and the overall willingness to be part of something.
Right, we're nearly very short time, so Heather wants to add something in here.
Yeah, I was just going to think of succession as the family, transitioning the family business, but actually succession in the workforce is as important. And de-risking your business, because, we can't really retire people now, but that individual will have a huge wealth of knowledge of what happens on that farm that mum and dad just take for granted. And what I love to see on all businesses is a bit of a how-to manual, a bit of a fact find of every department of the farm, of who does it, because it could be anyone that isn't there tomorrow. So what does that individual do? How does he make it work? What skill sets, the knowledge, attitude, skills and habits has he developed that you then need to replace? And it might be them, or it might be you outsource it as well. But for me, every family should have a how-to manual. Where's the stopcocks, the meters, the passwords, the drains, everything, in case any key individual isn't there. And it's not just family, it's key members of staff as well.
Thank you, Heather. And I think that's time to conclude this conversation. So really, it gives me great opportunity to thank our speakers today. We had a fantastic conversation. I think we could have spoken for many more hours on this subject of culture. It goes such a broad subject altogether. So please, ladies and gentlemen, could you thank our panellists, Phil, Heather, Paddy and Paul?